Well, happy Friday, and welcome back to our book study on Richard Foster's book on prayer. And this week we've been looking at chapter 10, which is on sacramental prayer. And I wanted to do this chapter at this point because some of the chapters before this that we've looked at have been maybe more experimental for us in our prayer life, and maybe they've been a little bit more open in terms of how they relate to our spirituality. And so what I appreciated about this chapter is it kind of grounds us again in this very, what he calls sacramental prayer, I would maybe also just call ritual prayer. And these are the prayers that we use in our liturgy, that we might use every day in terms of, like, if we say the Lord's Prayer, like he does at the very end of the chapter. These are self-contained prayers that are often not written for us, or not written by us, or we have to come up with on our own. But they are ones that are part of our daily routine at times, or at least our weekly routine, and they are very ritualistic in how we say them and when we say them. And I think this is very helpful. You see maybe on page 106 where he talks about these rituals in our faith as props. I like to think of ritual as being kind of the scaffolding in our spiritual lives that helps us to build that spiritual life. It helps us to build meaning into our moments of spiritual experiences. And ritual, and in some ways, and maybe I've said this before on here, ritual is in some ways like a container for the moment. We put that moment that we're experiencing something into this container, and ritual is what kind of helps to contain it. That's kind of abstract, but I think when you think about how, for instance, the place of the prayers of intercession in our service, on a Sunday morning, for instance, we have lots of things going on in our world, and you might come in on a Sunday morning and just think, I don't have any energy to think of a prayer at all because I just had a rough week, or I had so many things going on, or I was just focused on some things I had to get done this week. And then come these prayers of intercession, and we know we should be praying for all the people around the world and in our communities. And so when those prayers are written for us, when they're written by someone else, and when they're presented, we can just sort of rest in that, and we can just agree with the prayer, and it becomes that sense of ritual. But the important thing about ritual, and you've heard me talk about this before, I think, in these videos, is how often our spiritual lives are in a sort of a cycle. They are not just linear in the sense of we start at one spot and we just continue to grow and move into the next spot. No, we find they're more cyclical. As he talked about later on in that, kind of towards the end of the chapter, of this liturgical dance that was 3 steps forward and 1 step back. That is very much how we experience a spiritual life. It is a cyclical experience. It doesn't have a set course that never deviates. It comes back at times, and we experience these cycles in the spiritual life. And so rituals are often what help us return in that spiritual life. There is an experience of returning. He talked about that in page 108 when he talked about kind of what these sacramental prayers offer us, and he talked about how they help us resist the temptation of private religion. He goes on to say that through the liturgy, we are constantly being brought back to the life of the whole community. We are constantly being confronted with sound doctrine. We are constantly being forced to hear the whimper of the poor and see the tumult of the nations. That's very much what our prayers of intercession on a Sunday morning grant us. They grant us that ability to return. We find ourselves wherever we may when we come in on a Sunday morning. But now the Sunday service becomes a place of renewal. Because it becomes a place of return, of returning to all of those things that help us take us out of our own lives, but also remind us of the presence of God, and remind us again of God with us. And so these types of prayers, though we may learn these first in our spiritual lives, they never stop being important. Because they are this like he said, this prop or this support in our spiritual life that helps us to think about what it is we return to Because that was a question I posed to our in-person group, and I think it's a wonderful question to think of in relation to these types of ritual prayers. If you find yourself in a moment of where you're driving in your car or you're riding on a bus or something like that, you're not necessarily occupied in work or rest. You're just kind of in those in-between spaces. Where do you find your mind returning to? Where does it go? And when we ask this question, or when we are confronted with crisis or something that causes us worry or joy, what is it again we return to? I used to have a practice where whenever something would go well with me, I would say the line in the doxology of "Praise be to God, from whom all blessings flow." And that was just a way of reminding me, whenever things go well, it is still because of God's presence in my life. And so that was a ritual prayer, and it was just that simple way of acknowledging God with me and God's guidance and provision in my life. So just to be able to say, all blessings be to God, from whom all blessings flow, that's a prayer. And that is a return, because I'm heading out in my life and something goes well for me, and I return when it goes well to this prayer, because it reminds me again of how God is with me and how it is God who is guiding me. And I'm thankful for that. So you might have a similar type of prayer that helps you return when things don't go well. Or you might have a prayer that you return to when you're just in one of those in-between spaces that we find ourselves in day to day. That just looks for something to say, thank you, God, or looks for something to say, what could I pray for in the moment? Those are the kinds of ritual, sacramental prayers that help us, that support us, that guide us along, and when we look back, we realize they have been a part of that support, of that design for God in our lives. So I hope that you do help yourself to find some of these prayers for yourself. Just like I said, just something very simple, one sentence, a few words that just helps to bring you back, to help in that return to reminding yourself that God is indeed with you today. Next week, we will be in chapter 13 and 14 together, because they are both kind of similar. They're not exactly similar, you'll see, but they're similar enough. I thought we could put these two chapters together. So we're going to look at both those together. If you find yourself just overwhelmed throughout the week and you don't get to both, don't worry about it. Pick one to read. But they are both, we'll be looking at both of them next week. So I hope your prayer life is continuing to unfold before you. You're continuing to see and learn and maybe experience some new things about your own prayer life. And as always, if you have thoughts or questions or any of those things and you'd like to come to me and talk to me about that, always feel free to do that. Until then, I'll be praying for you, and I hope all goes well with you in your study, and we'll see you next time. God's blessings on you.